Okay, welcome back everyone. In this section, we are going to focus on hacking. So we will learn what is hacking and how it can be used, or how we perform hacking. So hacking is a process of getting unauthorized access of control. So you are not supposed to have the access to a certain computer or a certain server, and you somehow get a control over it through any mean. So this process is called hacking. So there are legitimate ways of getting control, and there are illegitimate ways. So hacking refers to those processes through which you bypass the user identification methods. For example, when you have to enter password or something like that, or you somehow exploit some vulnerability in the system, that you use this vulnerability to access the computer or enter the system. When we talk about hacking, we are usually referring to some malicious intentions. So we get a control over the system in order to perform tasks or activities that are malicious or that are not intended. So what are the different type of hackers? So the first type that we are going to study is called a black hat hacker. A black hat hacker is a one that performs the criminal activities. It is the hacker that we are mostly familiar with. For example, when we see movies and they refer to hackers, most of the time it's the one that performs criminal activities or performs actions that bypass the security of a system. And a true black hat hacker hides his identity. So a hacker never reveals his actual identity, because if he does, he's caught and he's performing malicious activities, then he's definitely going to jail. So he uses different methods, for example VPNs and using Tor networks, etc., to bypass or to hide his real identity. And a black hat hacker, the only difference between a black hat hacker and a white hat hacker that we will study next is of intentions. Black hat hacker has bad intentions, and his goal is to either destroy the system or somehow to use this system which he has control over for any evil purposes. And then there is the white hat hackers on the other end of the spectrum. So white hat hackers are mostly, they use their knowledge for good purposes. So their goal is to defend the systems from black hat hackers. They are mostly security researchers or penetration testers. They are usually hired by companies, and the companies paid them to audit their systems or test their security. So they are allowed or authorized to attack the systems. And then there are gray hat hackers who lie somewhere in between these two extremes. So gray hat hackers, they usually try to, for example, attack with machines, etc., and gain control. And if they get control, they will reveal to the owner or the person. So they are mostly looking for weaknesses in the system, and if they find some weaknesses, and they, for example, they will try to maybe attack your system, and if they are successful or they somehow are able to do this, then they will tell you, or that they will tell the person that he has a certain vulnerability or security flaw in the system which can be improved. So their goal is usually not to destroy the system or to gain an unauthorized access. So they will reveal their secret at the end. So that's why they are called gray hat hackers. So hacking is not a single step. It consists of a lot of features, and it requires a lot of patience and knowledge. So if you want to successfully attack a company, then you have to perform a lot of steps, and it requires a lot of patience. So the first step that a hacker performs is called reconnaissance. In this step, the hacker tries to get maximum information about its victim. For example, if he wants to attack a company or an organization, he would first go, for example, Google everything, their emails, their websites, their phone numbers, their address, their people who are involved in their organization. So he will gather every type of information to, because the more information you have about an organization, the more easier it is for you to penetrate or to attack these organizations or people, whoever it is. And there are basically two type of reconnaissance, active or passive. In passive mode, you simply Google about, for example, let's say there is a company XYZ and you want to attack it. So what you will do is that you will go over Google and then you will search about this company and gather all the information. So this is called passive reconnaissance. Then there is another technique called active reconnaissance. In this technique, what you do is that you actually interact with people from the organization. You, for example, send them an email asking about something and things like that. And this is called active reconnaissance. So this is a little bit dangerous because you are practically interacting with the organization and it can be traced back to you. So the goal in reconnaissance is that you should keep your interaction at minimum. So don't go or don't interact with things you don't want to or you don't need to. So the next step is scanning. Once you have this basic information, you can build on top of it and get more advanced or technical information about their systems. For example, if you are attacking an organization, you would scan, for example, what are their email addresses or what are their domain names. And then you will also try to find out what their IP address of their servers are, or for example, if there is an open port on their server which you can use for communicating, etc. So this is more like a more in-depth or technical analysis. So you also search for operating systems or different services running on their systems. So if you get an idea about what operating system they are running and what services they are running, you can use these services to find out vulnerability about these services, and then you can attack these devices using these flaws. Okay, so the next step is called exploitation. This is the actual hacking process where you get the control of their device. So your goal is to somehow force them or somehow enter into their system, and once you have entered into their system, your goal would be to bypass the IDS or intrusion detection system. There are a lot of versions of intrusion detection systems. For example, firewalls, your antivirus. There are native security features that are part of intrusion detection system. So your goal is to bypass all of these. And then once you bypass all of these, then you exploit these machines for your own malicious intentions. For example, you get a control of a huge number of devices at the same time, and then you can use these devices to perform DDoS attacks or denial of service attacks. So denial of service attacks are attacks in which the person tries to take down a running server. Okay, so the next step is post exploitation. So once you have entered or penetrated into their system, your next goal would be to maintain a long-term access. So you don't want to, for example, have just one-time connection and then you are unable to access it again. So the goal here is to modify registries, etc., so that you can access or control this device whenever you want. You will also try to get access to a higher privilege users. So by default, most of the users on any operating system are non-root. So there are certain actions that can only be performed by root users. For example, shutting off antivirus and these type of higher or risky tasks, they are mostly done by root users. So your goal would be to escalate or increase your access to the root level. And then your goal would be to cover your tracks. This is pretty common because you would not want to get exposed. So here your goal would be to delete logs and files that indicate your presence on the systems. And the last step is to implement this backdoor in a way that you get a long-term access by modifying system registries. This is related to the maintaining access that we already studied. Okay, so these are the steps that we can use for hacking purposes. But there are other techniques that can also be exploited or used for hacking purposes. So one technique is called social engineering. So in social engineering, you do not hack systems, but you hack people. And this is relatively easy if the person is not very tech savvy. So what social engineering basically does is that it employs or uses psychological manipulation. So you, for example, send a malicious link to someone working in an organization, and you ask them to open this link. And once he clicks this link, he in the background he downloads a malicious code that will execute on his machine, and then it will try to connect with your machine, and you will get an access to this machine. So this is one of the most easiest ways to perform hacking, but it also depends on the technical knowledge of the person. So as I already mentioned, that in this technique you trick people instead of systems, and it depends on the person. If the person is very tech savvy, it won't be easy to trick him into running or executing malicious code on his system. And social engineering exploits human trust. So if you send a malicious link to someone you trust, then it is highly likely that he will somehow click this link and you will get access, because humans are the weakest link in the security chain. So even if the systems are perfect, which is not possible, but still let's assume that even if the systems are perfect, then you can still fool or manipulate humans to get access to. For example, if someone gives you a password by mistake, or by you just ask him and he gives you, then the system, no matter how strong the password is, you can easily enter it if you know the password. And there is another relevant technique called phishing. So phishing is basically you send out a fake link which looks like a real link. For example, you direct him to a Facebook website which looks like Facebook, but you are actually running it. And whenever someone enters his credentials into the website, instead of going to the facebook.com, which is the original one, you will get all his credentials, and then you can simply use these credentials to log into his website. So this is basically obtaining sensitive information by fraud. So you will display, for example, fake login pages, etc., and things like that. So that's it for this lecture. So I hope you now have a basic knowledge about hacking. So in next lecture we'll start with practical hacking.